So in this lesson we will start implementing our view model. Now view model is going to be a big one, so we will not be doing it in one single video. We will split it across multiple video. So in this current video and in the current lesson we will only perform select operation, that is we will only display the data in that data grid that we have created. In the consecutive videos we will perform add, update and delete. Will add more functionality to our view model. Right now the only functionality that we will add to view model is display. So first, once more, we'll go back to Visual Studio. We will right click our view models folder and we will say add new item. Now when it comes to view models are also your classes. These classes will have a reference to your models. Fine, and these classes will contain a set of properties, and those properties will be used for doing data binding. Again, apart from properties, view models will also have certain behaviors that will be executed when you click on the buttons. So whatever functionality that is required, which needs to be executed for the view, will be done inside a view model. So we will right click and we will say add new item and we will select class from here. So we'll give it a name, say employee view model. This is the name for my view model. First of all, I'm going to make this class as public. Next, in my view model, I am going to have a set of properties, and those properties will be data binded with my views, because a view cannot directly interact with my models. Similarly, a model cannot directly interact with the view. The view model is going to act as a connector between my models and the views. And here again we might need certain notifications for our views. That we will do again by using INotify property change. So we will first include the namespace here, system.component model, and we will implement the interface INotify property changed. And again we are going to have multiple properties here, and for every property we need to execute this event whenever that property is changing. So I'm going to create a helper method that we can call. So I'll say private void on property changed string property name, and if property changed is not equals to null, that means there are methods that are added to this particular event handler. We can invoke it now. So property changed, and the current object will pass as sender as well as event args, that is property changed event args with the name of the property which has been changed. So that property name will come as a parameter here. Now once we did the implementation of INotify property change, next we need to create certain properties, certain commands over here that can be binded with the user interface elements that we have. So our view model is going to interact with our service that we have created, with our employee class that we have created. So first of all, we will add the namespace where our service and employee class is present. If you see this employee class, it's present inside MVVM demo.models, as well as my employee service is also present inside the same namespace. So we will add a using for that namespace here. We'll say using MVVM demo.models. A view model can have a reference to models, whereas a view cannot have the reference to models. A view cannot directly work with models. So here I need a property. That property, see, when it comes to binding your user interface elements like text boxes and all, you can do the data binding for properties. So we need a property here that can display that can hold a list of employees which are retrieved from our employee service. If you go to employee service here, there is this method called as get all. So whatever this get all method is returning, I'm going to store that inside a property, and that property we will use for data binding with the data grid that we have. So we will go back here. First of all, I'm going to create a constructor And now we will create our service object, say employee service, say obj employee service. In the constructor we will instantiate it, obj employee service equals to new employee service. Now we will be able to call this method get all. Once we call this method, it is going to return me a list of employees. In order to store that list of employees, here we will create a property. So we'll say property, say list of employee, say employees list. This is the name for my property. Actually this is going to be the name for my variable. See employees list, employees list, okay. Employees list. Okay, so this is my employees list property, and whenever this property's value is going to change, once again we will intimidate our user interface by calling this method on property change. So we'll copy this, on property change, the name of the property, that is this property. Now if you see our user interface here, when this view is displayed to the user, initially we want all employees to be displayed in this data grid, and once the user adds a new employee, once again we want to refresh this list. Once again, when the user updates and deletes an employee, we want to refresh this list. So each time we refresh this list, we have to call this method get all. I need to call it multiple times. So instead of directly calling the method over here, I'm going to create a helper method that will actually call my get all method and puts the data inside this employee list. So we will create a method. You will say private void, say load data, and here we will simply set employee list equals to obj employee service dot get all. And here in the constructor we will call our method so that as soon as somebody creates an object of this particular class, it should load all the employees inside this list. When this method is invoked, it interacts with my service, loads all the employees in the list, and when the employees are loaded, a notification will also be raised to my user interface. Now we need to do data binding with this property called as employee list, which is present inside this class called as employee view model. So we will go to our window1.xaml here, and in the window1.xaml we will create an object of our view model. So first we will add the namespace using MVVM demo.viewModels, and then we create the object of employee view model, say view model. We also instantiate it inside the constructor view model equals to new view model, and then we will set it as the data context for the window. We'll say this dot data context equals to view model. I'm not directly setting the data context for the data grid over here. I'm setting it at the window level so that it is available to all the elements inside the window. Inside the window we are adding our user control, so it will also have access to this view model. Now we will go back to our view model and we will do the data binding there. So we will go to this data grid and we will set the item source here. We'll say items source equals to binding path equals to name of property which contains the collection of employees. So here the name of properties which is containing the collection of employee is this one, because in the constructor we call the load method which calls our service, gets all the data, puts it inside this particular list. So we will simply use this list name for the path. And also we need to specify what columns to display. So we will specify the data grid columns. Say data grid dot columns, and text columns we are going to use, we'll give it them header, say employee ID, width we'll give auto, and then we will bind it with one of the properties. So we'll say binding path equals to the name of the property in employee class. See here, just a second, let me finish this. Okay, so over here what we did is we binded the grid with a collection of employees. Inside that collection of employees we are going to have employee objects, and each object will have ID property, so we are doing data binding with that property. So just like that we will have two more columns here. So one more and one more. And this is going to be name, and this is going to be age, and data binded name will be data binded with name property, and this one will be data binded with age property. So now let's run. We'll say start. So as you can see here, there is one employee that it is showing. Now the size of this window is a bit small. We can increase the height of the window. So I'll just go back to my window here. Okay, it's also having width and height. I'm going to remove that width and height because that was fixed actually. Let's go back and run it again. Okay. Now if I increase the height, all right, it's showing. Now the next operation that we need to implement is add operation. That we will do in the next video.